رسول الله رسول الله رسول الله رسول الله رسول الله ربنا وبالإسلام أحيانا وعلمنا بأن
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah, I'll just be very brief in explaining a quick comparison between the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ and what he has brought to us of the Sharia, and a comparison between what they call common law or man-made law that we find is commonplace today in our country, in Australia, or in pretty much every country around the world. And this is a very sort of I would say an interesting topic. A lot of people are very familiar with the word Sharia law and the perceptions that they have when it comes to Sharia law. First of all, the Sharia law is the law of the Muslims based on the instructions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran and the instructions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in the traditions and the narrations of the hadith, which we call in general the Sunnah. And Islam isn't the only religion that has laws. There are many religions that have laws and regulations that regulate different aspects of people's lives. So Jews have a law, they call it the kosher law. Kosher is pretty much the equivalent of halal. What is kosher, what's not kosher, what's halal and not halal. In regards to food, in regards to marriage, in regards to many aspects of their lives. So, Christians as well have certain laws, but in terms of their application, how much they apply on it and how much they take as literal or metaphoric and things, they differ from person to person and or from group to group or sect of Christianity and so on. As well, there are laws in other religions. Among the Hindus, they have certain laws of things that they're allowed to do or not allowed to do, on certain rites and rituals in regards to their worship, in regards to their lives, their rituals of birth, their rituals of marriage, their rituals of death and so on. Whether they're Hindus or the Buddhists, every religion has their certain laws, but it seems like the focus on as if Islam is the only one that has laws, and so you find a big focus on the Muslims having a Sharia law. Every religion has certain laws and practices and rituals that their adherents abide by, so there's nothing to worry about, nothing to fear. All of this hysteria that is created around the Sharia law. But I think the reason for this hysteria is that they find the Muslims very passionate about their Sharia law, and they find it something very important. And what's often quoted is a study that was done in the UK of different age groups of Muslims. They did a study of 16 to 24 year olds, from 25 to I think 33 year olds, all the way until the over 55s. And generally what they found, and what was in their study, they did a study of over 1,000 Muslims, and what they found surprising was that over 86% of Muslims found that Islam is the most important things in their life. Okay? And as well, what they found astounding is that they found that the young generation has a larger importance or desire to live by the teachings of their religion, to live by the instructions of the Sharia, more than the older generation. So they found in their study that 37% of 16 to 24 year olds in Great Britain would like to be regulated by Sharia law, whereas the over 55 category only 17%. Okay, so a lot of the people in the Western world found that strange, because they thought that these age groups, 16 to 24, are people that are born and bred and raised in Great Britain, and these people that are over 55 predominantly were not born and raised in Britain. Most of them are migrants. So they found this sort of confusing anomaly. It's not what you would normally expect. Okay, and there is, so they found it sort of like something alarming and cause of hysteria. The the Islamization of Britain, of Europe, because people are becoming very radical in their adherence to Sharia law, which they see as a challenge or confronting to the Western values or the Western law. And the thing is that it is because of a lack of understanding of what Sharia law is to many Western people that they have come to this conclusion. That we have to understand what Sharia law is and how and why Muslims predominantly desire to prefer it over man-made law. The first reason is that the Sharia law, its origin is from Allah. That it is what Allah has instructed the Muslim to do and the Muslim not to do. So for any God-fearing, practicing, obedient, religious, if you want to say, observant Muslim, definitely he's going to prefer what God says. And especially when that is put on comparison to man-made law, where the law is derived not from God, but rather from humans. And so definitely for a religious person, for someone who values religion and is observant of his religion, the word of God overrides the word of anyone else. Another sort of difference between Sharia law and you could say common law is that Sharia law is based not only on rules and regulations that are enforced by force, that are enforced by by law and order, but Sharia law is something that is inspired by God consciousness, by taqwa. Without taqwa, you cannot have people who abide by the law. As Aisha radiallahu anha, she narrates, she said, if the first thing that was revealed in the Quran, do not drink alcohol, do not commit zina, then the people would have said, we will never be able to give this up. But the first revelation that was revealed by Allah were verses about the hereafter, about paradise, about hellfire, until faith became established in the heart. When it came time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the laws and regulations after the migration to Medina, the people accepted it willfully. And to give you a modern day example of that is that we see the experience of the prohibition of alcohol in Islamic history worked very successfully. So we see that nurturing of taqwa, of God consciousness, of faith in the hearts of the Muslims, when alcohol was prohibited in Medina, and the verses of Allah in Surah Al-Ma'idah were revealed. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu innama al-khamru wal-maisiru wal-ansabu wal-azlamu rijasun min amal ash-shaytani fajtanibuhu la'allakum tuflihun. Innama yuridu ash-shaytanu an yuqi'a baynakum al-adawata wal-baghdha'a fil khamri wal-maisiri wa yasuddakum an dhikrillahi wa 'anis salah. Fahal antum muntahun? Will you now stop? The believers called out, Inna muntahun, Inna muntahun. We have given up alcohol and gambling. And they poured out the drums of wine that they had stored in their houses, and they flowed down the streets of Al-Madinah. And from that day onwards until this day today, I won't say 100%, but the predominant of the Muslims do not drink alcohol. Even in a country like Australia, where it is allowed to drink alcohol. On the contrary, it is culturally acceptable and culturally encouraged, socially encouraged to drink. And in certain societies, you're seen as an outcast if you don't drink alcohol and you don't go to the pub and so on. But the Muslims, by and large, still resist this. This is one example. Then we have another example of what's commonly termed the prohibition. The prohibition, it's like that. And this refers to the prohibition of alcohol, an experiment, a trial, an attempt of preventing and prohibiting alcohol in the United States. Imagine that. Imagine if I told you today, many people maybe have not heard this before. Imagine I told you today that America made alcohol production, consumption, transport, import, export forbidden. So Allahu Akbar. America's implementing Sharia law. This was a reality from the year 1920 to the year 1933. For 13 years they tried to enforce this. Then they gave up. You know why? Because they could not enforce it. They tried to close down the factories that produce alcohol. So people started to make alcohol. They started what they call bootlegging. They started to make alcohol in their backyards, in their homes, in their garages, and started to sell it secretly in the black market. And people actually started to die because alcohol is actually it's actually a poison. Alcohol is actually poisonous, and people started to die because of the contamination and the high levels of ethanol and other alcohols that were present in these concoctions. We have to ask ourselves, why did they want to prohibit alcohol in the first place? Because they saw of the great dangers of alcohol. They saw the amount of health risks. They saw the amount of abuse, of violence, family violence, domestic violence, family breakups. A lot of harms in the society occur because of alcohol. So they saw a benefit in doing this. So they tried to stop it. We don't need to go as Muslims. We believe that we don't need to go through this whole experience and find that alcohol is something bad and then decide to prohibit it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, who one of his names is Al-Hakam, Al-Adl, the legislator, the all-just, has already told us. So we don't need to, some people they say, you should try everything once. As Muslims we don't have that saying. Because Allah already told us what is in our benefit and what is harmful to us. We don't need to experience all these things and all of these disasters in our personal lives, in society, for us to realize that something bad, we have to stop it. And even when they tried to stop it, they were unsuccessful. Why? For 13 years they were unable to do it. But the Muslims for over 1,300 years they were successful. Why? Because of taqwa. Because of God consciousness and piety. And so this is what makes the Sharia something unique. And this is what makes the Sharia something that many Muslims look to as a high example and role model, as a successful system to bring benefit, to bring justice for the person and for the society. So, from the origin of the law, Sharia is seen by many Muslims as advantageous because it is from Allah. The one who Allah said about himself, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Does he not know who he created? And he is the most subtle, the all-knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows the creation, He knows what benefits them. Who knows you better than your creator? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows you, knows the human being, knows the social interactions, knows the social implications, knows the personal benefit and the public benefit more than what the people know. So this is one of the great differences between the Sharia and the common law. As well, that the Sharia is based on piety and God-fearingness, whereas the common law is just based on fear of the law. And once I saw a young man had printed on his shirt, if you can get away with it, it's not illegal. This is the mindset of a lot of people when it comes to the normal law. That the only thing that keeps them in check is fear of being caught. Is fear of the consequences. Whereas the Sharia, you find Muslims today applying laws of the Sharia, not fearful of any worldly consequences. They don't drink alcohol. They don't engage in usury. Women wear hijab. Men pray. They fast Ramadan. They give zakat on top of the tax that they already pay. Why do they do all this? Willfully, out of God consciousness. And this is something that is nurtured only by the Sharia, something unique. Another difference between the Sharia and man-made law is that the Sharia is robust. The Sharia is robust. It is very strong. It's not weak. There's no need to change it. So for over 1,400 years, the Sharia is still the same. There is no need to change it. Not only that, it's seen as something useful and positive. Even many people, they wish even to implement it now, even though it's not completely in implementation anywhere in the world currently. But Muslims, part of their faith and part of what they see as benefit, wish for its implementation because they see that it's suitable. Now compare that to man-made law. What takes a lot of people and loses faith in man-made law is that it changes all the time. What is seen as good and allowed before may become prohibited and bad now or in the future. What was seen as prohibited and bad before becomes allowed later. And so you've got people stuck in this sort of two minds. How can something be bad before, but now it's okay? I still think it's bad. Why should we allow it now? Or before something was good, but all of a sudden it's bad. Why is it bad now? I still think it's good. So people will remain in this confusion, whereas in the Sharia law, because it has been ordained by Allah, Allah has already shown us what is good and what is bad, and the people comply with that without any getting into this confusion about, something was good yesterday and then it changes. So Sharia has this consistency and robustness that it doesn't change, it's not weakened by time. And the unique thing about the Sharia as well is that not only has it expanded time, it's even expanded place. So the Sharia wasn't only suitable for the Arabian Peninsula. The Sharia was loved and implemented by people in the Far East, in China and in Southeast Asia, in the Balkans and in the heart of Europe, in the West, in North Africa, in Africa, Central Africa. The Sharia law was seen as applicable in every time, in every situation, and in every country. As well from the differences between the Sharia and man-made law is that the Sharia is seen as complete in every aspect of life. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, مَا فَرَّطَنَا فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. We have not been negligent in any aspect of the book. The Quran has given instruction in every aspect. Not one minuscule thing has been left out. And so we see, a lot of people, as I mentioned in the beginning, there is this perception and fear and anxiety about the Sharia law. So now the Sharia law has been demonized. So as soon as you say Sharia law, the first image that comes in your head is chopping off hands and beheadings and stonings and ISIS and things like that. But I believe, and many Muslims and many researchers believe, that there has been a systematic demonization of beautiful concepts in Islam. One of them is the word Sharia, another is the word Jihad, another is the word Allahu Akbar itself. Nowadays you say Allahu Akbar, what do you expect next? Something to blow up. Even Muslims sometimes joke like this. It's been indoctrinated. Allahu Akbar, what word is more beautiful than that? Allah is greater than all things. Who can argue with that? Is not God greater than all things? But see, this beautiful word has been demonized, has been made to look ugly. And this has been a concerted effort. Likewise the Sharia. The Sharia seems to be something so bad and so evil, something so scary. We'll open a book of Sharia. What's the first chapter going to talk about? Water and purification. How to cleanse yourself. How to go to the bathroom. What's the next chapter going to talk about? How to pray. What's the next chapter going to talk about? How to give charity to the poor. What's the next chapter? Where do we get to the hand chopping part? The Sharia has predominantly, the Sharia, if you want to look at it, is broken in half between ibadat and mu'amalat. Ibadat meaning rulings regarding worships. That's a bit strange to someone who's looking from a Western perspective of law when it's just got to do with public affairs. But the Sharia is more complete, is that it addresses private affairs, your personal worships, your cleanliness, and all of these have an important role to ruling the society as well. Dr. Umar spoke about the transmission of disease. How much does wudu and cleaning after going to the toilet and washing and cleanliness have a huge role in minimizing the spread of disease in society? We can go on forever and ever and ever. We can go on for ages speaking about the intricacies of the Sharia and how simple aspects of the Sharia have so much benefit and affect really the whole society. But this is what makes the Sharia unique, in that its completeness, its perfection in every aspect of life. And so we have the worships, whether it's cleanliness, whether it's salah, whether it's paying the zakat, the charity, whether it's fasting, Ramadan, and now they're even talking about the intermittent fasting and how healthy it is for people, organizing the health of people, public health awareness, performing Hajj, the ritual worship, when it comes to the rulings of inheritance, when it comes to the rulings of buying and selling, and the prohibition of interest and the prohibition of cheating and so on. These are the major principles when it comes to Sharia. When it comes to Sharia, when it comes to Sharia business and transactions, financial transactions. I'll give you one example of the benefit of Sharia in comparison to man-made laws. If you remember, I think it was 2006, 2007, there was the global financial crisis. Everyone remember that? Okay? There was a financial crisis around the world. And house prices and some major banks crashed. House prices fell to the floor. Property and so on. The prices dropped and so on. In America, for example, they found that the cause of the breaking of their financial markets was because of the high interest rates. And so what did they do to correct that? Was that they minimized the interest rate until it reached 1%. And so is this not something that shows that the Sharia and what is instructed in the prohibition of riba, in the prohibition of usury, is something of public benefit? And the proliferation of interest is what causes demise to people's assets and people's investments and people's livelihoods. And I remember a headline, an article that was written at the time: Islamic finance rides the wave of global financial crisis. The only, in the entire stock market that crashed, the only market that was still flourishing was the Sharia compliant market. It rode the wave. It wasn't affected by the global financial crisis because the Sharia economy is not based on interest. Rather, it's based on trade and equity and sharing of equity between people. And so there are many examples that we can go through. The Sharia looks at balancing personal freedoms and public benefit. And so often what people have this false concept is that Sharia law doesn't give personal freedoms, and that Western law or common law or man-made law generally allows public freedoms. We believe as Muslims, and we can see this and we can put this to a test, that the Sharia has a perfect balance between personal freedoms and public benefits. And one of the differences between Sharia and the man-made law is that the balance of personal freedom and public benefit is something that has been stipulated and ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in principle. Whereas in man-made law, this balance between personal freedoms and public benefit is affected by opinion, desire and experience. And I'll give you two examples of that. In Sydney, there's recently a controversy about what's called the Lockout Laws, if anyone's heard about the Lockout Laws. And they are laws to restrict the opening of pubs and clubs and the service of alcohol after, I think, 2 a.m. And so this law has actually been in effect for the past 4 years, and they've found a huge benefit in doing that, huge public benefit, in that the amount of assaults and the amount of people who are in emergency departments because of injuries and fights and so on has dropped down. The statistics say that 95% of people admitted to emergency departments on Friday night and Saturday night in the hospitals around the Sydney CBD are because of alcohol-related incidents. 95% of the emergency departments. And so, from their experience and from their opinions, it drove them to implementing just restricting slightly personal freedoms to stop the service of alcohol after 2 a.m. Allahu Akbar, go to sleep. Isn't it enough? But they found a marked reduction in the amount of people who are getting affected and getting harmed. Recently, unfortunately, the New South Wales government has voted to remove these lockout laws. And do you know who stood up against it? It was the doctors and the medical board and the medical association and the hospitals and the doctors. They said, "What are you doing? This is going to be so bad. And we've been benefiting so much and we've seen a huge improvement. But because laws are not designed out of good sense, but sometimes good laws are overridden by desires. And so there is not a look at the public benefit of people. You go to some parks in some areas, they say alcohol-free zone. Allahu Akbar. Did the Muslims come and put these signs there? And they wanted to enforce Sharia law? Why did they put these signs in these public parks? Because they saw a benefit in that. We don't have to go through so much trouble and so many people dying and so many people getting bashed and so many families being torn apart for us to realize this. And we say, Alhamdulillah ala ni'mat al-Islam. Another example is that now we have seen a rise in the incidents and reporting and public acceptability of sexual harassment claims. Sexual harassment was something that was rife. And this was based on inappropriate minglings between men and women. And so now we find in some schools they're implementing Sharia law in restricting contact between men and women, between the boys and the girls in school. Some corporate organizations, some businesses and offices now implementing Sharia law, restricting the interaction between men and women. No physical contact allowed, no sexual jokes allowed, no, comments that are inappropriate are not allowed. And even they have implemented some policies that if it is necessary in the work environment for a male to have a meeting with a female, then they should have a third party with them. Or if they are to meet alone in an office to have a meeting, a male and female, they must keep the door open to prevent any possibility of sexual misconduct happening, or at least if it happens, then it is something that's witnessed. Why did they have to go through all of these experiences and all of these women being harassed and all of these women being abused for them to reach to this conclusion? And the Sharia law of restricting the interaction between males and females, of stopping inappropriate speech between males and females, and only that which is reasonable and professional to be engaged between, especially between males and females. For there not to be any seclusion between males and females in private. For males and females not to travel, or especially females not to travel without a mahram, to restrict without a guardian or a male chaperone from their relatives, to restrict any possibility of sexual harassment. Even it has been a policy of one company that when there is a business trip and there are males and female employees, that the male employees should be in one room and the female employees in another room, but in two different hotels. Because there was problems that even males in one room, females in one room, but in the same hotel there would still be intermingling and there would still be sexual harassment between them. And so some one company came, and this got onto the news, and there was debate and discussion about it, that they saw that it was appropriate not only to put them in separate rooms, but to put them in 2 separate hotels in different sides of the city to stop any possibility of interaction between them. So this is why for many Muslims the Sharia law seems to be so much more appropriate, because we don't have to go through all of these experiences and all of this hardship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already given us the answer. And sometimes people may see it as a restriction of personal freedoms, but because of the overall benefit, and as well that the public benefit overrides the personal benefit. The last point I will make is that the Sharia law is a perfect balance of the spiritual and as well the physical. That the Sharia law doesn't only look at the betterment of the physical being, but also of the spiritual being, whereas man-made law just concentrate on the nurturing of the physical being and making sure that physically the human being is pretty much in a good state, whereas the Sharia law looks at these 2 aspects, and we see that something as well very positive, especially these days with the high increase of people who are suffering from spiritual problems or emotional problems, and the high rates of mental illness and mental disease and depression because of the lack of address of these issues, and this is not provided by the laws and by the society that is ruled by man-made law, where we as Muslims claim and we believe and we have experienced that the balance of the Sharia law in balancing the spiritual and the physical life of a person is something that is superior, something that is beneficial, and something that we believe that the West has much to learn from, and the non-Muslim nations much to learn from, but very more importantly is for the Muslims to feel proud of their religion, to reaffirm their faith in the truth and the miracle of this religion and their faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep our hearts steadfast on Islam and to forgive our shortcomings and our sins. Wallahu a'lam, wa sallallahu sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Al Bayan Radio, the voice of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah.